was that? Please, get me out of here.
You want me to get wet on account of you? Hey, man, I got on Swiss cotton underpants.
I'm gonna drown, sir.
Come on, we'll get the time of death from autopsy.
Please!
Come on, man. It ain't worth it. You are crazy. Come on.
The good news, Terrence, is I'll okay you to return to full duty. The bad news is that you'll be experiencing moderate to severe back pain.
Recognition of his leadership and tenacity, Lieutenant Terrence McDonough.
This is who we're looking for. Name is Donald Godshaw. You up to this?
Why wouldn't I be?
Still having problems with your back? You taking medication for it?
Only what the doctor prescribes. Got any illegal substances on you?
Big mistake.
Who are you?
I'm Dave, the guy you robbed. To make it right, you gotta come up with $50,000. Don't make me look for you, Terrence.
You mind stepping outside? I'd like to talk to you. I'm gonna give you a chance to make some money the old-fashioned way. With a cop protecting you.
You a crazy mother. I took you to a place.
It's amazing how much you can get done when you've got a simple purpose guiding you through life.
On my own.
Stand against the wall. You can empty your pockets, dump out the handbag.
You want a hat?
Yes.
Where the sun always shines.
What are these iguanas doing on my coffee table?
There ain't no iguana.
Yeah.
There are. There ain't no iguana.
Where's the 15,000?
Put that gun away.
Kill all of you. To the break of dawn, baby.
You know the people are friendly there.
Do you think these guys care you're a cop?
Shoot him again.
What for?
His soul's still dancing.
Back at home.
Hello and welcome to The Complete Works, an in-depth look into the career and filmography of Nicolas Cage. My name is Mike Smith. Joining me on this journey into the depths of true Cagedom is my friend, co-host, and fellow Cageaholic,
Mike DeCriscio.
How you doing today, Mike?
I am doing just swell. How are you, Mike?
I am also just swell. We are recording this podcast in a format that we have not done before, so hopefully this works.
Yeah, it'll be an adventure, and we're going to find out together.
Exactly. If it works, this podcast should sound better than it's ever sounded before. And if it doesn't
not,
work...
whoops!
Exactly. Anyway, so Mike, let's have some backstory on the movie we're talking about today.
All right.
Because that's how we always start this podcast. But before we get into the backstory of this current movie, I got to talk about another movie. I'm going all the way back to 1992, when independent filmmaker Abel Ferrara, known for crime movies like Miss 45 and King of New York, released what is still likely his most well-known movie, and that movie was called Bad Lieutenant, about a dirty cop in New York investigating a rape case while reckoning with his own demons. Harvey Keitel starred as the titular Bad Lieutenant and got a lot of acclaim for his performance. Martin Scorsese called it one of his favorite films of the 90s, and the critical acclaim of that movie brought Ferrara into the mainstream, at least for a little bit, and he was able to follow it up with a couple of studio pictures, Body Snatchers and Dangerous Game. And then 2009 rolls along, and acclaimed filmmaker Werner Herzog, known for films like Aguirre, The Wrath of God, Fitzcarraldo, and Grizzly Man, made his own movie called Bad Lieutenant, this one with the subtitle Port of Call, New Orleans. Possibly one of the most awkward titles any movie has ever had in the history of ever.
It's fitting that there's a subtitle for the subtitle in a movie starring Exhibit. That's a little internet meme joke for the people that don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty good, Mike. Did you think of that a while ago when you were saying
No, I actually just realized it right now.
That was off the cuff. That's pretty good. Anyway, so this movie, Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, has often been compared to Ferrara's film. A lot of people think it's a sequel or a remake because obviously they're both called Bad Lieutenant and because they both center on similar characters in similar stories doing similar things. Logically speaking, that would make it a remake or something. According to Herzog, though, he does not consider this a remake of the original or a sequel, and that the only thing this has in common with Ferrara's film is that it features a corrupt policeman as its central character. Ferrara, for his part, not been the biggest fan of Herzog's Bad Lieutenant over the years. In fact, Abel Ferrara has been quoted as being pretty angry about it. He has said, "As far as remakes go, I wish these people die in hell. I hope they're all in the same streetcar and it blows up.
Wow.
So yeah,
so really not clear on his opinions.
I'm gonna venture a guess and say he's not a fan. But Herzog's response probably frustrated him even more, saying that he had no idea who Abel Ferrara was.
Holy shit.
Following that up with, I've never seen a film by him. I have no idea who he is. I would like to meet the man. I have a feeling that if we met and talked over a bottle of whiskey, I should add, I think we could straighten everything out. Herzog did say that the film's title was probably a mistake, but so be it.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Now, I watched both movies, actually, in preparation for this podcast, Mike, and it's actually kind of remarkable how different the two movies are, even though they are essentially about the same thing. Ferrara's film is an intense, horrifying character study dealing heavily with themes of religion and how hard it is to bring ourselves back from the brink of despair. And Herzog's plays more like a dark stoner comedy. Just very aimless in its storytelling, content to let the narrative just kind of flow in any direction it wants. And I like both. I think both are pretty good. But only one has Nicolas Cage delivering one of his wildest performances of all time. So that's the one that we're going to talk about today, Mike.
Goddamn right it is.
Yeah. Now, had you ever seen Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans before, Mike?
I don't think so. I think this is, like we talked about the last few times, now that we're in 2009 and all this stuff. We're in living memory now of these movie releases.
Right.
So I definitely remember this movie coming out and its insane title and stuff, but I don't think I've ever seen the whole thing, if I've seen any of it.
Okay. Yeah, I had seen this once before, and the reason I had seen it, I saw it my freshman year of college. I very distinctly remember watching this because one of my first friends that I made at college, one of the first things we ever bonded over was our shared love of Nicolas Cage. And we had one day where we hung out in my dorm room, and we had like a Nicolas Cage kind of marathon, and I showed him Vampire's Kiss,
Wow.
and he showed me Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans, and both of our lives were changed that day, I believe.
You've never been the same since.
Exactly. There's a reason this podcast exists, and I believe it is because of that day, Mike.
Wow.
And because you've allowed this to exist for as long.
I rue the day then.
Anyway, so Nicolas Cage stars in Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans as Terrence McDonough, the titular Bad Lieutenant, who spends the majority of the film either on cocaine or heroin. When you're watching the movie, you're thinking to yourself, I think this guy might not be a great lieutenant. I might even describe him as a bad lieutenant.
Yeah. I think that's fitting.
Yeah, his love interest, a prostitute named Frankie Donenfeld, is played by Ava Mendes, which makes this a Ghost Rider reunion, which is pretty interesting. And from there, this movie just has a pretty wild cast, Mike. When you were watching this, did you expect the amount of people to show up in this movie?
No,
that came in?
Definitely not.
Yeah, so first you've got Val Kilmer in this movie, playing Cage's partner, Stevie Pruitt. Then you've got the voice of Chucky himself, Brad Dourif, as Cage's bookie, Ned. Dourif was actually also in Amos and Andrew, so that's another Cage reunion there. And like you mentioned before, rapper Exhibit plays Big Fate, the drug dealer Cage is after in connection with the murders. Jennifer Coolidge, a.k.a. Stifler's mom from American Pie, plays Genevieve, the woman married to Cage's dad. Fairuza Balk, who played Dorothy in Disney's Return to Oz, but who I had a crush on back in the day for her role as Vicky Valancourt in The Waterboy.
Wow, yeah.
She is in this movie playing Heidi, a cop who Cage goes on a date with. And then you've got Michael freaking Shannon showing up for just like 2 scenes. He's only in 2 scenes of this movie as Munt. And he also appeared with Cage once before, Mike, in World Trade Center. A very different kind of cop movie.
Yeah.
To say the least. And then Vondi Curtis Hall, who played the reporter Ben Urich on Netflix's Daredevil. He is in this movie playing James Brasser, the police chief. Denzel Whitaker. Now, that's a name that you may not know, but most people at this point have definitely seen him because he played the young Forrest Whitaker in the flashbacks at the beginning of Black Panther.
Wow,
yeah,
interesting.
He plays Daryl, the young witness of the homicide in this movie. So that's pretty wild. And weirdly, I mean, his last name is Whitaker. He is not related to Forrest Whitaker at all. He just has the last name Whitaker and looks exactly like him.
That's what they want us to believe, Mike.
It's all a conspiracy, man.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, my boy Shea Wiggum, appears in a couple of scenes in this movie as Justin. He is best known for Boardwalk Empire, but he is one of the great character actors working today. Recently, I think a lot of people would know him for his memorable role as the guy in Kong Skull Island who sacrifices himself for no reason. Oh, yeah.
Yep. Got it.
Yeah. Now, the film was written by William N. Finkelstein, who mostly wrote for television and primarily for cop shows, like Law and Order, LA Law, Cop Rock, and NYPD Blue. I had to mention that he worked on Cop Rock. I don't know if you're familiar with Cop Rock, Mike.
I feel like you've probably explained it, but I don't remember.
Cop Rock was a show that lasted for like one season in 1990, and it was a police drama, but it was also a musical, hence Cop Rock. I've never watched like a single actual episode of Cop Rock, but I've been obsessed with the idea of that show for a very long time. And of course, it was directed by Werner Herzog 3 years after his previous film, 2006's Rescue Dawn with Christian Bale, and just 1 month before his next film, which was 2009's My Son, What Have Ye Done, which starred Michael Shannon. And this movie opened in limited release and only ever made it to a total of 96 theaters, so it did not do great at the box office. On a budget of about $25 million, this made about $10 million. But I mean, it never really had the chance to expand and do that. So, what were you seeing on November 20th, 2009? If Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans was not opening near you, Mike, well, you could have seen Planet 51, an animated kids movie in which The Rock plays an astronaut who lands on a planet populated by green aliens and live in a suburban 1950s setting. You may remember the trailers and poster for that movie, but it's not supposed to be good. You could have seen the movie that won Sandra Bullock her Oscar, The Blind Side, was released on that day, which is a movie that I absolutely can't stand. Or you could have been one of these swarms of teenage girls who were out seeing the second Twilight movie, New Moon, on its opening day.
That's the one. You got me.
That's where you were, Mike?
I camped out.
Were you Team Edward or Team Jacob?
Team Jacob, duh.
Yeah, obviously.
Come on.
Yeah, come on. And the IMDb plot synopsis for Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans reads, Terrence McDonough is a drug and gambling adult detective in post-Katrina New Orleans investigating the killing of 5 Senegalese immigrants. So, Mike, what are your overall thoughts on Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans?
My first reaction is just, wow. That's mostly it.
We can wrap that up, Ray. That's about it.
Yeah, I think that's enough. We can cut it. No, this movie is absolutely bonkers, and I'm not even sure if it's in a good way. There are, of course, the choice Cage scenes. The Cage juice we're all looking for. There's a lot of that going on in this movie.
Yeah,
but it doesn't really serve anything. I don't think. I mean, I don't know. It's basically Cage unhinged and just on 11 and also dope. And it's I know I'm sort of preemptively getting to your question coming up, but this reminds me of Vampire's Kiss mostly. This is one of those kind of like throwback early Cage movies where he's trying to make a name for himself. But really, it's the downfall of Cage. I feel like we're in that era now again, forever. This is our lives, and you've done this to me, Mike. I don't regret it at all. It's fine. But the movie is just like how you were talking about it. It's just so disconnected from itself. Like none of the things really flow together. None of the scenes. About an hour in, we consolidate into a plot, and then we abandon it 20 minutes later.
Yeah.
So I kind of just mostly watched this movie, and it happened. I don't know. That's basically it.
I mean, I think saying you watched it and it happened is probably a pretty good description of what the experience of watching this movie is like. I will say that I like it quite a bit, and I am a fan. I think this movie is a hell of a ride. It's just and you're right. There's not so much of a plot. Like there is like a plot sort of, but it's really more like a lot of loose connective tissue just between events that just happen. Yeah. I think that's kind of the idea, though. It kind of lulls you into this world that Cage is living in and kind of gets you into his worldview. I really dig it. I think Herzog appears to be having a blast in this movie, and Herzog is a very weird dude. Yeah. And I think his sense of humor is different than most people's, and this to me is a Herzog comedy. I think it's a very funny movie at times, and Cage gets to let loose. It's dark and it's fucked up. It's often pretty funny, and I sort of want to this movie feels like Herzog's attempt at a stoner comedy. And I sort of want to program like a triple feature that is this movie, The Big Lebowski, and Inherent Vice.
Wow.
Just to see how... I think those movies would actually fit really well together. Yeah. All of them are, dark stoner comedies in which the protagonist is trying to piece together a mystery. Like, it could work. And, they're very loose in their plotting, and there's a bunch of subplots around that don't go anywhere in all three of those movies. And, like, I think it could be a really interesting triple feature. Or maybe that's just too much nonsense, but
maybe.
But I don't know. I find I really enjoyed it, and I mean, comparing it to the original Bad Lieutenant, it feels like it's complete night and day. I think the original Bad Lieutenant is a movie that I like more. I think that movie's like a very tight hour and a half, and it tells a very complete story, and it has a very complete arc for its character, and it has a very powerful ending, and it's just really intense and crazy. And Keitel has given it his all in that movie, and that movie verges on becoming Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans at times. Like, it almost feels like it's getting over the top, but it really straddles the line really well to become this very tense character piece. And Bad Lieutenant Port of Call New Orleans just obliterates that entirely.
Yeah.
But I like that about it. I don't know. I think a lot of that is in Cage's performance, where I guess we should get into the question now. What did you think of Nicolas Cage in this movie?
Just goddamn, dude. And I can't even tell if that's good or bad for me. Like I said, it has the Cage juice, right? It's a lot of that happening where he's just shouting and stuff. But at the same time, there's a couple scenes that he's doing the evil, dirty cop thing, and I was believing it and was sort of engaged in his character. And then it's just I lost it. I don't know. This movie didn't connect with me a whole lot. I didn't find myself having fun enjoying it that much. But Cage is still doing his Cage thing, and I guess that's really all I can ask for, Mike, in these 2009 movies.
Fair enough. Yeah, so I think Cage is great in this movie. Just straight up, I think he's fantastic. And I think you mentioned that the movie that reminds you most of is Vampire's Kiss, which is another movie that I love. I love Vampire's Kiss.
Fair.
But, and I think that's a fair comparison. This is 20 years after Vampire's Kiss, and it feels like he's channeling that same energy, but in a different kind of way. I feel like Vampire's Kiss is a performance that is over the top pretty much from moment one. Whereas I think in this movie, it's off kilter, definitely in its first hour, but I think in the second hour it really escalates. And it feels like the more fucked up Cage's character gets, the more insane his performance becomes. In the movie, so it's a very gradual thing. So by the end of the movie, you're like, "Holy shit, this guy's nuts!" But when you're watching it at first, it could be mistaken for a remake of the original Bad Lieutenant. I get it.
Yeah.
Working with Werner Herzog on this film, did he push you? What was your relationship like?
Werner really didn't need to push me. Mm-hmm. I already had an understanding of what he could or couldn't tolerate from his previous movies. I knew where I wanted to go. I knew that this was the Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call New Orleans, and therefore I had to have behavior that would be outrageous and be fun to watch in terms of its badness, so to speak, and that people would go to the movie to see that, to see the train wreck of his personality, if you will. So one of the things that I did want to convey was the hideousness of the drugs. I felt the way I could be responsible with the material was if I made the drugs so unattractive in terms of my behavior and even my facial expressions that nobody would ever really want to do them. But Werner's not really into message movies. He's more about let's celebrate the bliss of evil. Right. And I understand as well because that's where the comedy is in the movie.
And I think what's interesting, I think he actually really effectively portrays how much worse this character gets over time. And he starts off bad, he opens the movie mocking a dude who's drowning,
right.
He does save that guy, but still, he's mocking the guy who's about to drown, and he's like, "Oh, you want me to get wet for you? I have silk underwear on," and all that. He's has to take painkillers, and then he ends up in this whole addiction thing with cocaine and heroin, and I love watching Cage act batshit insane. But what I thought was kind of interesting about the movie is that his voice changes halfway through. Yeah. Okay. So that wasn't just me. That was
no. His accent changes a couple times. I think.
You think so? I feel like for the first hour or so, it was fine.
Yeah.
It was normal Cage voice. He was acting a little weird, out of it, over the top a little bit. But I think there's the scene where he nearly kills the old lady, and then immediately after that scene, his voice just completely changes, and it starts mumbling a lot of his words, and it becomes I think I described it as a 40% Al Pacino and 60% Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, where it's,
that's actually really spot on.
He's just kind of talking like this, like
yeah,
like definitely just talking like this, and like it's
holy shit.
And yeah. I don't know. It seemed like a very conscious choice, though. And then by the end of the movie, he kind of reverts back to his original voice. So it's just that like last stretch of movie where it's just the more trouble that Cage gets in, the more his voice like deepens or changes and stuff like that. So there's like nuances to this performance that I think are really interesting. And then at the end of the movie, everything just like suddenly works out. Right,
yeah.
Like at once, everything at once just like works out. Like Shea Wiggum's like, "Oh, I'm taking the hit off you," and like Exhibit like dies or whatever. But there's a scene in Cage's office like a bunch of things happen at once, and I'm blanking on like everything that happens. But like Shea Wiggum says, "I'm taking the hit off you." The murder gets solved or something, and like
he hits it big on the football bet. And
yeah, his bookie comes
the parking
in
tickets are taken care of, and yeah.
Yes, yeah, like everything that was a problem throughout the entire movie just suddenly is fixed in like 30 seconds without Cage having to do anything. And I think that's pretty funny. But like, as soon as that happens, like you see Cage's performance change, and he starts to like, his voice kind of returns back to normal. But then the implication at the end of the movie is that it's just like a never-ending cycle where like it's just going to keep happening again. So it seems like he's going to revert back to his shittier ways. But maybe he's not. Who knows? Like that final shot, it has at least a lot to be interpreted. Or it doesn't. I feel like that final shot is just Herzog fucking with people. Like it could definitely be that. But so you mentioned Vampire's Kiss before, so we're going to talk about how this role fits into the roles we've seen Cage play so far. And Vampire's Kiss is definitely one to call back to for sure. Oddly, I think the role it reminded me the most of was Matchstick Men. In a weird way, I feel like the actual performance that Cage is giving, like it seems like a very deliberate kind of jittery.
Right.
Like he has, and it's all like the vocal tics and like the way he's moving around. Like it just feels like his performance from Matchstick Men. But I think Vampire's Kiss is definitely an apt comparison too. Is there any other roles that you that came to mind when you were seeing this movie, Mike?
I'm not entirely sure. I think Peggy Sue Got Married, if only just for the voice. It doesn't go that far, like as it did then. Yeah. But I think it's just it reminded me mostly of those early movies that we were like, Vampire's Kiss and not Zonderly. I guess that's set in New Orleans. So
yeah. Oh yeah, that is set in New Orleans. All right, I'll accept it. The judge will take that.
Thanks. Just those early couple movies where it's just absolute insanity and he's just kind of going crazy. And really, Vampire's Kiss to me it stuck out the most. One, just for the how unhinged he is in this, but also like he ends up looking really pale, and he's got like this weird hunch limp thing he does, like with his gun just like hanging out of his pants, and it just sort of like he's just like morphing into another person, which is even personified by or not personified, but indicated by the voice change, right? So I don't know. That was the movie that stuck out the most to me. But what else? Did anything else jump out to you like that?
That was a good call on Zonderly that it takes place in New Orleans. I will say that Cage has played a cop twice before, in It Could Happen to You and World Trade Center. Although in those movies, he seems like a pretty good lieutenant.
Yeah, I do appreciate Herzog in his weird, dark, twisted humor kind of way, right? Like you said, he starts off as a bad guy and he's mocking the dude who's drowning and stuff in prison. And ultimately, he does the good thing and saves him, and is immediately punished for it. He has a lifelong back injury that leads him down a pain or addiction to strong drugs.
Right. Well, that addiction it's only like 6 months later. The rest of the movie takes place, I think. So that addiction kicks in real quick.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But no, you're right. Yeah, he does like the one good thing, even though he's being shitty about it, and he's immediately like thrown into this like life of back pain. So yeah, it does seem like there's this. Herzog is a very existentialist filmmaker. Herzog himself has become a meme at this point. Just people like joke about Herzog narrating things and be like, "Oh, the bleak emptiness of the world." That this man looks into the dead eyes of a fish and sees nothing but sorrow, and like something along those lines. That was a ad-libbed Herzog line. You can have that. Herzog.
I believed it.
If you're listening, Werner Herzog, you can have that one. But it's. But yeah, like he has become somebody who people like joke about in that sense. But he like all of his films kind of have that through line, and I think Bad Lieutenant, even though it is in general like I think that's his attempt at comedy. And, you know, you can debate how funny this movie actually is. Like, it's very dark. For sure. You know, I think it is emblematic of his worldview that is personified in all of his movies. But are there any moments or scenes in this movie that stood out to you, Mike? I mean, there's got to be a few.
Well, yeah. I'm going to pick the two, or talk about the two ones not specifically related to things happening in the scene, but it's the weird Herzog like film stuff he does. In particular, there's the scene when Cage is going to talk to the highway cop to get the speeding ticket for his bookie's daughter taken care of or whatever, right? And he's like it's a car accident where a truck or whatever hit an alligator and flipped over or some weird New Orleans shit. And the scene happens, right? And then the scene just ends with this like handheld close-up of an alligator mouth on the side of the road. And then, like, we pan back to its eye, and we just sit there for a bit. And then, like, just weird, that happens, right? And then the same thing happens later when Cage and his team of questionable lieutenants are staking out somebody's house. Not Exhibit's house. I can't remember the whatever. One of the criminals' houses, and there's two iguanas, which may or may not be there.
Well, they're definitely not there. It's
No?
Well, Cage sees the iguanas, but nobody else sees them. So it's Cage hallucinating.
Oh, all right. Yeah, that makes sense.
How long has it been in there?
About 20 minutes.
Who else?
His girlfriend, at least one infant. That's as far as we know.
What are these fucking iguanas doing on my coffee table?
There ain't no iguana.
Yeah, there are.
There ain't no iguana.
What the fuck is that? Fucking iguana. Are we set up?
I mean, I believe it, yeah. But then we have the same thing, right, where it's the handheld camera close-up on the two iguanas, but that one's way longer than the alligator one.
Yeah. There's a whole song that goes along with that, too, yeah.
Yeah, Nick Cage and Val Kilmer standing in the back of the frame, just looking off-screen while we watch these iguanas. So those definitely stood out.
Yeah, those dudes definitely stand out. I mean, the gator scene I didn't remember because I'd seen this movie once before. The iguana one was stuck in my memory. Like that was the one that.
Oh, really?
Like when I thought back to Bad Lieutenant, that was the moment that I was like, okay, I remember the iguanas. That's okay. And as I was watching the movie, like some stuff like triggered some memories for me, but like the iguanas was the one that I could like pinpoint to and like, oh, the iguanas, Bad Lieutenant. Like that's that's it. But yeah, the gator scene is interesting too because it pans away from the dead gator in the street and kind of goes into this other gator that's on the side of the street, looking at the dead gator, and it's the same thing, like the handheld gator cam, Gator Cam 2009. But it's and it's just this like long lingering look, and it's Herzog kind of observing the nature of animal versus man or whatever. I don't know, but
yeah, just some weird Herzog shit.
I'm not sure exactly what it meant, but I think it was compelling. Like nonetheless, I was like transfixed by it. But there are a ton of scenes in this movie that just stand out to me. I mean, I think the iguana one is the one that I remembered very much. But the one that really like triggered in my mind, like as soon as the scene started, I was like, oh yeah, this scene, this is amazing. Was the scene where he nearly kills the old lady in the retirement home?
Yep.
Which is, I think, probably like one of Cage's finest moments as Nicolas Cage.
I want to know where Daryl is.
My God.
Nobody saw me come in. Nobody knows I'm here. This old woman's going to run out of air, and you're going to have a tough time convincing people that it wasn't you who did it to her. And even if you do convince them that you didn't kill her on purpose, you're still going to have a tough time selling them that you took care of her. What the fuck?
God.
Now listen to me. Where the fuck is he? I said, where the fuck is he?
He's on an airplane. Miss Antoinette bought him a ticket and sent him to live with her family in England.
It's okay. That's okay. That's a good girl. Suck it up. Come, there you go. There you go. That's it. Take it in. That's a good girl. Take it in. Good. 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 That's it. Breathe. Maybe you should drop dead, you selfish cunt. You ever think about your kids? Or your grandkids? Huh? Sucking up their inheritance through that fucked oxygen tube? And Benny's fucked intensive care? You fucks, I hate you. I hate you both. I should fucking both. Just right now, I should fucking kill you fucking both! You're the fucking reason this country's going down the drain.
Like it's like a 3-minute scene, and it's the old woman in the wheelchair being wheeled in by her nurse, and like the door is open, and like the door closes, Cage is behind the door, and he's just standing there shaving.
I forgot about that.
Standing there shaving with electric razor, just like kind of like going all over his face, not even hitting anything, and just and just like talking to the nurse about like where her son is. Daryl was her son, right? I think her nephew or something like that. Like trying to find out where Daryl is, and she's not going to tell him. And so what he does is he takes the oxygen tube out of the old lady's nose, and she starts suffocating. And he's like pressing her for information. And then he just brings out his gun too, just for extra effect. Then she finally tells him, and then like he puts the oxygen tube back in, and then he just starts shouting at them for like a minute, telling the old lady how like she's what's wrong with America, how like how she's burning up her kids' inheritance and stuff like that. It is crazy. That to me is prime Cage right there.
Yeah, I mean, there is also the Cage freakout in the pharmacy. I mean, most of this movie, it's basically a 2-hour Cage freakout.
Sure.
But when he goes to pick up his prescription in the pharmacy, and the nurse is on the phone and won't fill it for him, so he just goes over the counter and is just shouting at her, and also pulls out his gun, I think, or throws money at her or something like that. I can't remember. It's insane. It's just ridiculous.
And that's kind of the first moment that you see Cage start to freak out a little bit too, which is actually interesting because there's a scene in Matchstick Men where Cage also freaks out in a pharmacy. It's the best scene in Matchstick Men.
Yeah, I think I conflated them when I was watching that. I was expecting him to yell, "Have you ever been dragged out into the sidewalk and beaten until you piss blood?" I thought that was going to happen in this movie, but I forgot that was Matchstick Men.
You forgot we already did that one.
Yeah.
We've done so many movies now, man. It's crazy.
It's wild.
But yeah, so there's the old lady in a retirement home and the pharmacy and stuff like that. What did you get out of the ending, Mike? The ending of this movie in which Cage reunites with the guy that he saves in the beginning.
Yeah.
Right?
Chavez, I think.
Yeah, and that guy sees Cage in a hotel in like a low moment. And it's a moment that echoes a moment that happens earlier in the movie too. So we should back up a little bit and talk about that. So Cage, early in the movie, he's hanging outside a random club, sees this couple walking to the parking lot, and pulls over and starts like harassing them about like drugs in the club and stuff like that. And then he makes a guy watch as he fucks his girlfriend in the parking lot after busting them for drugs.
Yeah, after smoking their crack for them.
Yes. It is pretty insane. That's a pretty wild scene. And then the movie ends with him about to do the same thing. Essentially, he's pulling over and like harassing another couple outside the club. And I don't think do you really see what happens right after that?
No, I assumed it's the same thing though, because he ends up in a hotel with drugs afterwards. Right. In the next scene. Right.
I don't think it shows if he has sex with the girl in that one too or not. But he does get the drugs, which is what he really cares about anyway. And so yeah, he ends up in the hotel with the drugs. It's another low moment. And this is after he is like sort of redeemed himself almost. Like he's like the murder has been solved. Like everything starts to work out, and he's just falling back into his old habits. But then when he has these drugs, he runs into this guy who he saved in the beginning of the movie, and the guy's so grateful to him. He's like, "Wow, you saved my life!" Like he doesn't even care that Cage was an asshole when he was doing it, and
right,
which is fair. I mean, he did save his life, but and so the two of them end up going to an aquarium together, and just start watching the fish, and. And then, Cage recalls the poem that he sees at the victim's house earlier in the movie, which was like, "Do fish have dreams?" or something like that, right?
Right.
And they start talking about that for a minute, and then they're just sitting there, and the music starts to swell, and Cage just does like a little laugh, like a huh, and then it cuts to credits. Like just,
yep.
And that's it. So what did you get from that, Michael? What did you take away from that ending?
I think it was like you mentioned earlier. I think it's just Cage recognizing the cycle is going to repeat, him and Chavez are flipped. What you would expect, right? The ex-con guy that was drowning in prison in the first scene.
Yeah.
Has a job. He mentions he's been clean for over a year, I think, or something like that. And he's like, meets the guy that saved his life, and he's really kind and grateful and all this stuff. And here's Cage, a police officer who's done absolutely terrible things, but got clean, right? There's like this, like in that little montage at the end there where everything gets solved in 30 seconds. We also see him receive like a commendation from the police department. His girlfriend's pregnant. They're all sober, like, right? He's like, oh, we'll stick with sparkling water. Haha. Like, there's that weird scene after the ceremony and stuff. But then he's right back where he was, and he's relapsed, and he's being a terrible person again. And I think that was just like the futility of it all. Haha. And then cut to credits.
Right, which is a very Herzogian thing to do as well. It's a very Werner Herzog thing. I wish he had narrated some of this movie, actually. I mean, he does make a voice cameo. I don't know if you heard that.
I don't think I did.
He's the voice on the answering machine at Eva Mendes's house, I think, in her penthouse.
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
I don't know. As soon as it started playing, I heard that thick German accent. I was like, oh, that's
him.
Werner Herzog. That's nice. And let's not forget, Werner Herzog was also the villain of Jack Reacher, and it was awesome. But
yes, he was. Yep.
just throwing that out there as a random trivia fact. It's great. Go watch Jack Reacher. Yeah, we haven't even talked about the best line in this movie, actually, which is towards the end. When he's in Exhibit's house and there's a big gunfight, and then Cage, and Exhibit's still alive, Cage is still alive, but the guys who came to shoot them are dead. And Cage says, "Shoot him again! Shoot him again!" And Exhibit's like, "Why?" And Cage is like, "His soul is still dancing." And it pans over, and you see the guy breakdancing over his body.
Yeah, that was some David Lynch shit.
Shoot him again.
What fool?
His soul's still dancing.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. And then they kill him, and I guess I should have put it together then, because I think an iguana crawls past his body.
Yes.
So it's all coming together now, Mike.
It's
Maybe
all coming
I actually
together.
like this movie. Changes everything. It all hinges on the iguana.
Exactly. The iguana makes or breaks this entire movie. But other scenes, Mike, that stood out to you? The spoon story, perhaps? This very heartfelt moment between Cage and Eva Mendes.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah,
which also felt like him lying.
Well, he does come back with a spoon later. Although I think he says it's not the same spoon. But it's just it's a very long scene, and it's a funny-ish scene. It feels sort of funny, but also like emotional at the same time. It like really straddles a line there. Then there's another story where while Cage is like cracked out, he starts telling a story about how one of the football players transforms into an elk.
Hey, did I ever tell you a story about Nigga Elk? Nigga Elk, yeah? I was watching TV, the game, right? Ronaldo Hayes, he got tossed the ball and he was running with it. He was running. He jumped over 3 linebackers in midair. He sprouted antlers. Like a gazelle. Like an elk. He landed again, he ran. He scored a touchdown.
That's the crack talking.
Hey, listen, I'm not worried about you, so don't be concerned about me. Because I'm not concerned if you're not concerned, so don't worry, because I'm not really concerned.
No. I'm worried, because if you drop dead, I'm the motherfucker they come looking for. You understand?
Easy, because I'm not easy to eat.
And that was pretty wild. And there's just so much here, man. There's so many great lines in this movie. I think, his soul is still dancing is probably my favorite line. There's actually one line that I think speaks to everything about Cage's character, which is when he's talking to his dad after he's been suspended from the police, and he says to him, "A man without a gun is not a man." And I feel like that tells you a lot about Cage's character and about his worldview. But I'm also a big fan of his other line, which my other favorite line in the movie, which is "Whatever I take is prescription, except for the heroin." And it's lines like that I feel like clue you into the fact that this movie is like meant to be like kind of funny.
Yeah, yeah. I did appreciate the fact that every time he shows up at Eva Mendes's apartment and she has a client there, they just rob them. Ricky pretends to be her pimp, even though he's just her boyfriend.
Yeah, that was pretty good. What did you think of the relationship between Cage and Eva Mendes, Mike? I feel like they had a lot more chemistry here than they did in Ghost Rider. Yeah, they did. I don't know. It was just one of those, like, these two people are bound for just like a car crash, disaster, train wreck, and we're just kind of stuck to watch it. It's sort of like was that Wild at Heart with Nick Cage and Laura Dern, right? Where it's just these two
Oh, in this one, it's much more. They're just debaucherous, evil people kind of thing, doing some bad stuff. And you see it's just they're pedal to the metal towards a cliff, and they're just not going to stop.
Yeah,
but in this,
break it down, baby.
Yeah. But in this movie, like we have like, oh no, we have that short montage or whatever, the resolution where it's like, oh man, everything turned around for them. It's gonna be great.
Right.
And
well, then Cage starts to relapse. But it seems like Eva Mendes is in a pretty good place. Like, she's the one who wanted to go to rehab in the first place.
Right.
And it seems like she has stuck with it, at least, and she's pregnant. And, she seems like she's doing well. Cage is the one who is kind of relapsed. Although, do you see him taking the drugs towards the end in the hotel room? Or he hasn't taken them yet before he gets stopped by the guy from the beginning?
I don't know. I think I was all in the implication, Mike.
Maybe, but I feel like I think it's meant to be read either way. Like maybe him laughing, like it's him realizing that like he doesn't need to take the drugs anymore, or like he's a better person now for it, or whatever.
That's true.
Yeah, who knows? I guess I think it can be read in a lot of different ways. Other scenes in the movie, any performances you want to give a shout out to? I'm a big fan of Shea Whigham in this movie. I'm a big fan of Shea Whigham in general, but I feel like in this movie he only has like 2 scenes and he's hilarious both times.
Yeah.
Where he says it's like recurring bit where he just keeps saying, "Oh yeah."
When he walks out into the hallway and comes back in and says it again. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
But no, I don't really think there's any. I mean, everyone's doing a good job. It's just that Cage overpowers everybody else in this movie.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Michael Shannon is here. He's funny for a second, like his one scene. He runs like the evidence room, and Cage wants him to steal drugs, I think, and he just won't do it because there's cameras now.
Right.
That's his whole arc. That's the whole character.
Yeah. He's only in like 2 scenes, and a lot of these people are only in a couple of scenes of the movie because this is really Cage's movie. In a story that doesn't really go anywhere. It's a lot of different subplots kind of fighting for screen time. Mm-hmm. It feels like some of the time, and I like that. I like the kind of like laid back, casual storytelling aspect of it. It does like to me that's a lot of what Big Lebowski is, and a lot of what Inherent Vice is. Like those are movies that are actually. I mean, I think Big Lebowski is a very tightly plotted movie. It's just very complicated and like it goes into a lot of different directions. And I think this movie is similar to that, except it's not tightly plotted. It is just like.
It just wanders.
I think one of the interesting things about this movie is that Cage is bad in every sense of the word, but he's actually a pretty good detective. Like he's able to figure out the mystery on his own. He's able to gather the witnesses and all that stuff, and he's able to, and he's like the only thing keeping him from being a good detective is all of his other stuff. Going on.
All the crack he smokes,
all the drugs he's on, and all the addictions that he has come to. But I think for the most part, like he's actually like pretty good at being a detective in the movie. Like he's so I think it's interesting that he's written that way. 'Cause I feel like especially in like the original Bad Lieutenant, I feel like he's bad at like every aspect of his job and his life. And in this movie, I feel like Cage is actually a very competent detective who's just been being like destroyed by these addictions.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, though. I mean, because he's a good detective, quote unquote, in the fact that he's able to plant the evidence on exhibit in order to get him to go. Right? Like, he unravels who it is and finds him and all that stuff, but then he makes him smoke from his crack pipe so it can be the one with the DNA on it, right? Like,
right. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so a good detective to an extent.
Yeah, as far as like looking at the records would be.
Right, like problem, like solving things, like being able to figure things out, like put two together and all that stuff.
Yeah,
he is a bad lieutenant. Let's not lose sight of that, Mike.
No, you're right. I did appreciate that scene right after they bust Exhibit, like they break into his house or whatever with the cops, and it's him and Val Kilmer. And Val Kilmer's just like, all right, so say he reaches for the gun and we just blow this guy away.
Right.
Like, just trying to plan his murder.
Yeah, and in that moment it almost feels like Val Kilmer might be a worse lieutenant than Nicolas Cage is. And
is such a thing even possible?
It could be. Bad Lieutenant 2, Port of Call Val Kilmer, is going to be wild, man. I'm telling you.
Can't wait. Coming soon. 2020.
Anyway, so are there any other scenes, Mike, that you wanted to talk about? Anything that just jumps out to you in any particular way? Or should we move on to Netflix reviews?
No, I think let's hear what the people have to say.
Let's hear what the people have to say about Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. These are the Netflix and Letterboxd reviews for this movie. I got a 5-star review here from Netflix. Things begin rather routinely, courtesy of LA law writer William Finkelstein, but quickly transmogrify into truly Herzogian madness. An alligator's wild-eyed lament over a road-killed lover. I don't know where he got that from, but sure.
I believe it.
The best use of "oh yeah" since Yellow.
Wow.
Yellow. Yeah, that's a good cut. That's a good.
Yeah.
And the most egregious eyebrow indicating since Cuffs. Herzog isn't afraid to ask the tough questions either. Questions like, do fish dream? Doesn't everyone have a lucky crack pipe? What are these iguanas doing on my coffee table? And should we shoot him again? And of course, the answer to that last one is yes, because his stole is still dancing.
Outrageous.
5 stars.
Absolutely outrageous.
On the flip side, here's a 1-star review of Bad Lieutenant Port of Call, New Orleans. Have always enjoyed Nicolas Cage's movies, but this one is a bad one. Over-the-top foul language, a little of that can go a long way. Sexuality rating, you are kidding. He had sex with a hooker right in the movie. The language and sex act ruined this movie.
It's our old friend of the show.
Yeah, we haven't heard from this friend in a while, I feel like.
Yeah.
But I love when good old Virgin Years comes by to tell us that the movies that we're the R-rated movies that we are watching have bad language in them.
Good old Temperance Virgin Ears.
Yeah. You would think Temperance Virgin Ears would avoid a movie that was titled Bad Lieutenant. It's in the name. He's going to be a bad lieutenant. Watch Good Lieutenant if you want to see a good lieutenant, you know? That's all there is.
Yeah. You got no one but to blame but yourself, Temperance.
All right, here's a 3-star review from Letterboxd. Imagine this scene. We're in a retirement home. A woman wheels an older woman in a wheelchair into her room. The door closes, and behind it is Nicolas Cage, shaving with an electric razor. He then proceeds to talk about a murder case. The elderly asked to talk to his superior. Cage states he has not slept in 3 days and is having trouble remaining courteous. So the most rational thing he decides to do is take out the woman's oxygen tube and then threaten her helper with a gun. And to bring it all home, he tells her to drop dead and calls her the C word. What a movie. All right, now here's a 4-star review of Bad Lieutenant Port of Call, New Orleans from Letterboxd. A difficult movie to evaluate. It is like the Showgirls of crime dramas. It's a film that kind of transcends notions of quality.
Oh my God.
In no small part due to Nicolas Cage. I can't tell if his performance has good or bad. It is only cagey. And also has elements of satire where it's not clear whether everyone involved was actually in on the joke. One thing for sure, though, it was very entertaining. There are 2 distinct scenes of pure Herzogian madness in particular, which are simply amazing. I feel like that Showgirls thing was a revelation for you, Mike. That really got you.
Yeah, that's like the perfect description of this movie, I think. The Showgirls of cop dramas.
Yeah, there it is. Here's a 1-star review of Bad Lieutenant Port of Call, New Orleans. What? Bad Lieutenant? How about bad movie?
Zing.
Why did Nicolas Cage do this film? This is his worst. This is putting a valued actor's chops in a low-budget film with no real story. It was like Bradley Cooper in Bending All the Rules.
Holy shit.
What a deep cut.
Wow.
The reviewers were the deep cuts this time. Cage has done a lot of great films, but this flick was a huge flop. That's my opinion. Like other reviewers, I feel like I wasted 2 hours of my time, except that I fast-forwarded through that last half hour. Should have started sooner.
Damn.
Which means he missed a lot of the best stuff, but, oh well.
Their loss.
It's a shame. Here's another 1-star review of Bad Lieutenant Port of Call, New Orleans from Netflix. Living in New Orleans, I was excited to see a lot of the shots done on scene. Beyond that, the movie was pretty painful to watch. Cage couldn't have under or overacted his role more. I am still trying to figure out which he did, but either way, it felt bad. Supporting roles by Longoria and Kilmer left me further unimpressed. Mixed up his Avas there, I think. Bland acting, uncompelling stories, a predictable and unexciting plot from the get-go, taking its desultory path around a family's murder, where Cage does live up to the film's title in a bad cop role, using drugs, manipulating anyone he can for self-preservation. It is tough to really know any of the characters' motivations, and there is no salient character evolution. The movie ends, you go, huh, and wish you'd spent your time doing something else. And now, finally, Mike, I have one last one. One 1-star review of Bad Lieutenant Port of Call, New Orleans, which I think sums up every argument from the detractors for this movie. Don't waste your time. Watch the original with Harvey Keitel. Boring.
Wow.
Almost said Harvey Weinstein for a second there.
Tough room, huh? Tough crowd.
Hey, no respect at all. Hey. Don't mind us. We're just loosening our ties and pretending we're Rodney Dangerfield.
Yes.
It's a Nicolas Cage podcast.
It's an audio medium.
Anyway, Mike, I think that wraps up our talk on Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. Is there any last thoughts that you want to leave us with?
No.
That was succinct and to the point. I will say I really enjoy Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. I think it's a lot of fun if you're on its wavelength, and if you're not on its wavelength, then I don't think you would find it as fun as I do. But
yeah, I think I missed it by that much.
Just a little bit, and that's a shame. But it is it is arguably the movie that this podcast was made for.
Yeah, that's true.
If I double featured Vampire's Kiss and Bad Lieutenant in one day, Mike, and it changed me forever. So
here we are.
Here we are, 55 episodes later. So, Mike, where can we find you online this week?
You can find me at twitter.com/mdfilmblog.
And you can find me online at twitter.com/msmithfilmblog and all of our podcasts and stuff at filmbook.com. Thank you so much for listening to The Complete Works. I'm Mike Smith. That's Mike DeCriscio. If you are listening to this review via our podcast on iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, rate it, take a moment to give us a review, help support this podcast, and FilmBook take part in our Patreon campaign. You can find that at patreon.com/filmbook. Now, any and all feedback, compliments, topic discussions, even hate mail can be sent directly to podcast@filmbook.com. Please list the podcast you email about in the title of your email, because we produce just so many different ones to keep track. We would love to hear from you. Now, join us in 2 weeks for another episode of Complete Works, where we are talking a movie that was pretty huge for me when I was 16. Mike, I don't know if this was huge for you either, but we are talking Kick-Ass next week. Or 2 weeks from now.
This is a movie.
I take it you didn't have the same... didn't have that same impact for you.
I don't think this is a movie that changed my life in any way.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a life-changing movie. It was just a pretty big movie when I was 16.
Okay.
It was a movie I was really excited about. It was a movie I really liked and I really enjoyed. I had to sneak... I saw this movie twice in theaters. I had to sneak in both times because I was underage.
Wow.
But yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to it. Plus, you can keep an eye out for Film Bookcast, where we are talking either Ready Player One, A Quiet Place, Isle of Dogs, whatever Mike gets a chance to see.
Life's a struggle right now, everyone.
Because I've seen pretty much everything. So whatever he sees... I don't even know what we're reviewing next week. It's a mystery, man.
Stand by for the Rampage cast.
God, I hope not. You just made us review Pacific Rim Uprising. I really hope.
Look, man,
you don't bank on giant monsters 2 weeks in a row.
Way to put me on blast.
Anyway, thanks so much for listening, guys, and thanks for getting in the cage.
Oh yes. You see, I